of an MBE, which was awarded to me in 2011. So I know firsthand what it feels like. It's an amazing feeling when you get that letter to say that somebody's nominated you. In my day job, I am an honours secretary in a small team, and we are the secretariat for all honours business in the DFE. We are the main interface between people nominating others for awards, and this can come from members of the public, ministers, or external organisations. And we also facilitate moderation of nominations by the most senior civil servants before submitting to Cabinet Office for the Education Committee to consider. I hope that this event encourages people to become honours champions across the education sector, and that those watching consider nominating someone who is deserving for an honour or a Queen's honour. There will be time for a Q&A at the end, but do feel free to put questions in the chat box as we go along. And I will pop back at the end with some information on how to make an education nomination for someone amazing. I will now hand you over to Susan Ackland-Hood, Permanent Secretary for the Department for Education. Thank you, Susan.
Thanks very much indeed, Shirley, and welcome to everyone out there who's made time to attend this event. It's really exciting to be part of the, I think, the first ever Honours Week held by the Cabinet Office. And we've got events running all through the week to get under the skin of the honours system a bit. I think it's sometimes seen as a bit mysterious, perhaps a bit of a black box. And so we thought we'd get out and about and talk a bit more about how it works and encourage people to nominate, because many people, I think, assume that there might be a more mysterious process than that goes on in the awarding of honours. But it really is very, very heavily driven by people taking the time to nominate someone for an honour. There's a bit of process then that goes on where departments collect nominations that sit in their field, that feed up to the various honours committees and look through them and do a bit of sifting. But again, that's really about whether the nomination shows that the person's made a really good and exciting contribution. And then there are a set of honours committees, and we'll hear from some of the members of the Education Honours Committee today. And I sit on that honours committee, although I'm not a voting member, because I sit there because I'm the permanent secretary in the department, and we effectively have kind of filtered and fed up the nominations. So we give some views, but we also take feedback from the committee about what they'd like to see in honours nominations in the future. So what I'm hoping that we're going to be able to do today is hear from some people who have had honours, who were involved in the nominations. We've got a particular focus on honours in academia in this event. And just really encourage people to take part in the system, to nominate and to put forward those people who who have done something that goes above and beyond and that deserve to be honoured. Because if you nominate them, then we can help make sure that their activity gets properly recognised. If people aren't nominated, it's much harder to figure out where some of that recognition should go. I'm going to start by asking Steve West to join us and talk a bit about his own role, his work, and his role as a member of the Education Honours Committee. Steve, it's lovely to see you.
Thanks very much, Susan. It's great to be here, and what a fantastic event. So thank you for inviting me. I'm Steve. I'm the Vice-Chancellor at the University of the West of England in Bristol, and I've been that for 15 years. And I've been in education for 35 years, but I work across health and education. So I'm doing roles in both sets as non-execs. And importantly, I sit on the Education Honours Committee, have done, I think, now for 5 years. And I'm joined by some independent colleagues who are there to consider and debate the nominations that come forward. We're fiercely independent and we have wonderful conversations and it's great reading the fantastic things that people are doing. I received my honour, a CBE, in 2017 in the New Year's Honours. It was a tremendous surprise, really, for me. and it's in recognition of the work that I've done in education predominantly. But it's about not just doing the job, it's about doing things way beyond the job and having impact. And that's really, really important. It's a fantastic experience, and I've thoroughly enjoyed being on the committee. Most of all because I read some unbelievably fantastic things about all of the great work that goes on. So that's me, Susan.
Sorry, sticky mute button. Thanks very much, Steve. Just give us a little bit more, couple more sentences on what we actually do in the committee. Because again, I think this is one of the bits of the process that can feel most sort of mysterious to people.
So what happens in the committee is that committee members receive packs, and these packs are the citations and a little bit of information, background information, and they appear twice a year. And committee members independently review all of those packs, and we vote on each individual. We consider each individual. Many of us will go a little bit behind the scenes and search for a bit more information, and we'll find out about those individuals. And after we voted and everybody's voted, we then all meet and we sit round the table and we consider all of the applications again against the votes that have been cast. We debate, we challenge, we scrutinise. We have inputs where we need further inputs, further information, and then we make our decisions based on that process. And we do that for all levels and for everybody that we see. And very importantly, what we read really does inform our judgments. And so one of the really important things is that as people are putting citations forward, are putting their cases forward for others, is to really pull out what's special, what's the impact been, why this person stands out from the crowd. And it is, as I said, more than just doing a good job. It is, that's the given. It's where do you go beyond that? And then after those decisions, the Education Committee make a set of recommendations which go forward to the Main Honours Committee, where the process is considered again alongside all of the other committees. And then the final judgments are made and obviously then go to number 10, Prime Minister's office, and then on to Her Majesty.
Thanks, Steve. Really clear. I'm now going to introduce each of the other members of our panel. We're going to have a panel discussion a little bit later, but I thought it would be really good just to meet each person individually and hear a little bit about their work. And these are all colleagues who've been nominated for and received honours. So first, we're going to turn to Jeff. Jeff, would you like to introduce yourself, tell us a bit about your work, and tell us about being nominated for an honour and how that felt?
Well, what I would like to say very quickly, I arrived as from Jamaica as a migrant in 1955, and I have no idea what I was going to do because my mom sent for me to work, and unfortunately for her, I was only 14 years and 11 months, so I had to go to school. And therefore, I had no formal education before that. And I managed by going from a secondary modern school to get these honours. And it's a long story, but it shows what can be done. And I went from a migrant in 1955, and I got an OBE in 2003. And that was for my work in terms of charitable work and for my scientific work. In that I eventually ended up working for the brewing and distilling industries. And then I ended up teaching at the Heriot-Watt University as a professor. And I was therefore given this OBE. And there have been various debates. And when I told my mom, you know, who passed away, so she couldn't come to Buckingham Palace with me, and there was the question of whether one should take the OBE or not, because I'm from the middle of London, from Islington and Haringey. My mom, very Jamaican, she said, well, you know, people complain in the past, they didn't get anything when they worked. Now you've got something because you've worked, go get it. Or go collect it. And therefore, I got that's a little story about my OBE. And then I still work while I was, you know, I retired in 2005, but I continued my work in the community. I'm on various committees doing with race relations. My scientific work developed. I developed a process called the barley abrasion, which changed the industry in terms of how it processed malt. And I traveled abroad representing the industry. And I also try to defend the rights of people in the community. And I had a letter from London, very to my surprise, in 2014, that I was being knighted for my work on charity, science, and human rights. And I now act as an advisor to the honours team in Scotland. And I work closely with the head of that team and her staff. And I receive the nominations and I look through them very carefully. And I give my comments.
Thanks very much indeed, Jeff. Incredibly powerful story about your mother, I thought, but also that ability to put something back into the honour system through your work with Scotland as well. Thank you. I'm going to ask Margaret and then Tom to introduce themselves in a similar way, and then we'll go into our collective discussion. Margaret, hello, it's very good to see you. Do you want to just tell those watching a little bit about you and your work and about your honour as well?
Thank you, Susan, that's great. Margaret Lowe, I coordinate outreach and widening participation in WMG. That's an academic department at the University of Warwick. What that means is I work with young people in schools and other organisations. And we're an engineering department, so I raise awareness of the breadth of engineering and the wide range of engineering careers. It's really important that young people are aware of the options available to them in terms of careers and make informed decisions about their own career. And because I'm at a university, you may assume we're taking a sort of university approach, but actually we work with lots of apprentices. We have our own apprentices as well. So it is about raising awareness of engineering to young people. I'm very fortunate. Most engineers and scientists actually are really passionate about their subject. So if you ask colleagues to give a little bit of extra time to run a workshop or to give an assembly at one of our local schools, they're very good about it. So I do a lot of work in collaboration with people. So it did, because most of my work is in collaboration with people, it did come as a bit of a shock, the award. I was awarded an MBE in the Queen's Birthday Honours list in 2021. It was during lockdown, so I got an email about it, and I just opened the email and I just got quite a shock. I couldn't speak about it for a little time because it was something so far off my radar. So that's a bit about what I do and me.
it's amazing how many people who get honours say they never thought it would happen to them, while also telling stories of doing the most amazing work. So thank you for everything that you've done, and I'm really glad it did get recognised. And I think one of the things we're trying to do today is make sure, everybody who's doing really impressive things has the opportunity to get nominated and recognised in the same way. Thank you. I'm going to introduce Tom now, who's our final panel member. Tom, do you want to just talk a little bit about your work and also your experience of the honours system?
Yeah, for sure. So I am Professor of Disability Research at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Tried saying that in a hurry. And I'm a social scientist, and all my career I've been working with disabled people and also around issues of bioethics. I've been at WHO, been at Norwich Medical School, and now I'm in London at London School. Like other panelists, it was a complete shock to open that email. I also got honoured. I got a CBE in the Queen's Birthday Honours 2021. It was a great unexpected shock. It was very pleasant, and I wasn't sure whether I should accept it or not. And three things inspired me to accept it. It took me a week to work it out. I didn't talk to my mother because I knew she would love it, but I talked to my brothers and my children and so forth. And one was that I looked at the New Year Birthday Honours from 2021, and I thought, actually, these are all great people. This is a good system. They deserve to be singled out and honoured at whatever level for what they've achieved for their communities and for their disciplines. So that was one thing. Another was seeing that other academics, in particular, my friend Francesca Happe, had been suitably honoured and recognised in previous honours lists. And my third reservation was really, this is the empire. This is the CBE. And like many people, I'm a little bit uncomfortable about our legacy of empire. I would rather it was excellence, not empire. But I looked at my Black and West Indian and Afro-Caribbean friends and found that they were accepting. They were being honoured. They were accepting. My friend Beverly Barnett got an MBE. I met Yinka Shonibari. He got a CBE. And I thought, well, there was a time when it was important to say, no, we don't want to be part of this system. But I think now is the time when people should say, actually, I am part of the British community. I deserve to be recognised. And where I've done exceptional work, I'm going to step up and receive that honour. So that's why I did it, for my disabled community, for all the people who don't get recognised, who deserve to be recognised and who do great work in this community.
Thank you very much indeed. Really powerful, Tom. Thank you. I'm now going to invite all our panellists back in, and we're going to have a collective discussion together. So I'll just give it a moment while the technology works its magic. Thank you. So I've got a few questions, but I don't want to drive this too much. So what I'm hoping is I'll ask a couple of questions and we'll end up in one of those discussions that my main role will be to have to stop before we run out of time. Anybody watching, you can put comments and questions in the chat bar, and I will also make sure that those get picked up and addressed. So I was going to kick off by saying, what do you think might hold people back from nominating someone for an honour? Anybody got a thought on that?
I think I'll go. I think part of it is not understanding what's required. I mean, they will go on. Sometimes some people will go onto a website and get fazed by the website, fazed by the initial process of having to put pen to paper or finger to keyboard, depending on how you're filling it out. And that is we have to understand that is a huge barrier. And people not quite understanding what they should say, how they should say it, and then what happens to it. So I think what we're doing at the moment is a really good thing. I'm a deputy lieutenant, and we have this conversation to try and reach into communities in particular and help support our local communities to think about honours and how to engage with it and answer those difficult questions sometimes that Tom's touched on, and coach people through. So I think part of it is that I think for academics, sometimes it's just about they're very busy in their own worlds, and they haven't got the time. They just don't think that way.
Thank you. Anybody else got reflections on that? What might be barriers? Margaret?
I was just going to add, sometimes we're so busy doing things that we don't capture the outputs. So I think it raising awareness of what we are doing. So I think it's just, we're in the now rather than what we've done.
Yeah, I think we can all recognise that one. Are there things that people have seen working, or ideas that you've got about things that would help prompt people to make nominations? Again, it could be things that we could do as part of running the process, or it might be things, I don't know. I always think it's quite interesting if you can hook it up to other things people are doing that are about celebration and recognition. So we sometimes run awards inside the department, and we sometimes try and kind of remind ourselves of, there's something coming through that looks really good, perhaps we'll put it into the system. Are there other kind of thoughts people have on what might help people remember and be prompted?
I think a process like this week are very good. I also think that there are, as it were, academic bodies like the British Academy and the Royal Society and so forth. And I'm sure, they're easily identified.
Yeah.
But it's our colleagues who are doing extraordinary work, but maybe not very visible work, that we have to worry about and reach out further to. And I suppose it should not be who you know, but it is the fact that everybody who's got an honour is a potential recruiter, as it were, of somebody else who deserves an honour. And I hope that maybe reaching out to that existing network to ask them who else in their community is deserving might be a way forward.
Yes, I really like that idea of people acting as advocates. But you also talked about the people who are doing the work that might not be so visible. And I think there's also something about, do you think there are particular patches of activity or areas of interest in academia that either look like they get under-honoured or over-honoured, or are more or less likely? I mean, we've talked, Steve, I know in the committee, about making sure we're thinking about the whole community of the sector, not just the most prominent and obvious. But I'm interested in that. So what do people think? Are there places we should particularly be focusing and targeting?
I think it's very easy to forget all of the unsung heroes actually in universities that make things happen, and not just necessarily look at whoever happens to have the top job. So I think it's really important that we all recognise the standout people, and I think we're getting better at it. I think we're spotting talent wherever it sits, and then being able to tell the story. And it is about telling the story in a way that really does demonstrate the impact, and also the answer that very important question: why is this so important at whatever level? Those human stories that we've all got but sometimes don't get across on paper, that's really important. So I agree. I think often people maybe only thinking about those that are in obvious leadership positions, but actually there's an awful lot that doesn't sit in that space that is tremendous.
Yeah,
and those honours were really important.
We all know somebody, I think, in all our organisations who isn't, hasn't got the kind of biggest span on the chart, but is the person you go to who you know is going to do the thing with goodwill and make it happen. And there's something about that as well. Jeff, did you want to come in on the point about kind of where's the recognition going at the moment, and how do we make sure we're thinking about really touching everybody with this system?
Well, I think that, the list, when I get it, you find that, the academics are fairly well represented. What I think we've got to look at is the ordinary folk who, work in the community, who work, the Girl Guides lady who picked the kids up every day for the last 25 years. And thus we need then to relate with the community where these things happen. and then ask them, to submit or to encourage them to put people forward, because we don't know those people. And therefore, in the applications I've seen, whether they're from the Highlands or from the Lowlands or whatever, there are, the person who I've just described, the person who spent their whole life doing something in the community, which ensures that the community works. I think if that's the kind of honor, and that then motivates other people because they think the system is fair. And that's what is important. We must find a better way of communicating to the people in the community that helps to maintain its, what I call the human aspect.
Yes.
And if we do that, then that will be so much appreciated.
I think that's really important, Jeff. And I think that it's not just that people will think the system is fair, it's also that they'll understand it's a system that is interested and will honour people who've done all sorts of things in all sorts of different contexts. It's not sort of for the ground or the people who've already got their names on a lot of letterheads. And I think there's a real challenge in that, because I think the lists have got a lot stronger in that, but the ones that tend to get reported on the front page of the papers are still, there's a sort of certain sense in which they're the people have heard of. So trying to make sure we're not just giving those honours, but we're telling those stories well. So I've been talking to the Honours Secretariat about, should we be doing a sort of almost like an honour a day tweet through the year so people can see sort of more faces and more experiences. But I think there's also something about, again, this panel's focused on academia. I do actually also agree with you that if we only focus on academia, we won't. I reassure you that other panels are available. But even academia, there's something about making sure it isn't all focused on sort of, it's about excellence, but that's not the same as just the usual suspects. It's about excellence at all levels and in all fields. And I'm really interested in how we can support that and get people to come forward, because the other challenge is, if you're world famous, A, you're a bit more likely to get nominated anyway, but B, if you're not, so there is a bit of system in which departments and ministers can suggest names. They still go through exactly the same filter, by the way. So, and as Steve says, the honours committees are ruthlessly independent, but you're rather more likely to get, have that happen to you if you're already world famous than if you're quietly doing something unsung but brilliant. And so the nominations are particularly important for the unsung heroes. And again, I think sometimes people sort of assume that they won't get through or that it's not for people like them. Actually, your chance of getting through for some of for BEM and MBE actually is not bad if you nominate. And I think people don't always know that either.
I think
it says nominate people who are great, and we'll bring them through.
But I think if you look through the list of people who've been previously awarded, that is really, really helpful. And it's not the headlines, the actors, or whatever else on the front page of the Daily Mail or whatever it might be. It's the unsung heroes. And then you realize these are all good people. This is open, transparent. You can see why they've been nominated, and you think, well, I would be honored to be among them. And I think that's the main thing. You'd be honored to be among them.
I think the other thing is, Susan, sometimes it's there's a lot of focus when the lists are first published and announced. And the press will always do what the press does, which is to gravitate towards those that other people know. It's how they get their interactions and clicks. I think what you've suggested in terms of maybe thinking about on the web pages, but also tweeting, because increasingly social media is the way in which people connect, to remind people so that it's not just twice a year, that actually the process needs to be fed. It's a machine that needs to continue throughout the year. And I just think there are fun ways in which we could do that. There are ways in which we can bring it to life. because in the end, human stories are the things that people connect to. So let's use that. Let's try and find a way of using it to really spread the diversity that is already in existence that we want to promote, we want to profile. I doubt very many people would know that I'm severely dyslexic and, have ended up being a VC. How on earth did that happen? It's, weird. So those stories are the things that matter.
Yeah. I was just going to add that lots of people do outreach as an extra to their normal work. It's now part of my work. But it's lovely to have that work recognised because people are taking on additional tasks and activities. So I think it is really, and when I got my award, people were really pleased because it showed that work was being valued as well. So I think it's not just the traditional academic roles.
Yeah, I think that's really important, Margaret, at that point about it's not just academic roles, it's other people who do brilliant work in the sector and actually in any sector, isn't it? And I also, you've reminded me of one other point I was really keen to say at some point during this session, which is there are a couple of things that in the sort of let's get this out of the black box and into the open. There are a couple of things that kind of Steve mentioned early on when he was talking about how we assess honours applications that are just worth people hearing, I think, just from the point of view of kind of giving people the best support and the best chance. So certainly the Education Committee is really interested in showing the impact, especially impact you can really evidence. So definitely honours nominations that say this person did this thing and the numbers went from X to Y, that really helps nominations get through the process better than somebody writing. We often get ones that have barrel loads of testimonial letters attached to them. Steve is grinning because he knows what I'm talking about. And it's definitely not about the number of testimonial letters you can collect or even the beauty of the writing of the testimonial letters. It really is about, it works just as well to have a simple form that has good evidence in it of what you've done. And I thought that was worth saying. And the other thing I think is worth saying is the other sort of thing you hear in the conversation quite a lot is the honours system is about trying to recognise excellence and people who've gone above and beyond. So you get a little bit of, is that just the day job or is it going above and beyond? And sometimes I sometimes think that that can be tough on people who've chosen to do a public service job when they could have done other things. It counts to do your job really, really outstandingly well, or to be doing things that sort of stretch beyond the boundary of what might have been expected. So Margaret, you got yours, even though it was your job, because you did it absolutely brilliantly. But that's the other thing I would definitely say to people thinking about filling in nomination forms. Think in your head, what's my evidence of the real difference this person has made and their impact? And how can I show it wasn't just doing the job? It was, so actually we don't give people honours just for being the Vice Chancellor because you get paid for being Vice Chancellor. It's got to be about doing more than the job. So those are the other two things I was going to say. Jeff, I think were you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I was saying that this is when I look at it, when I'm giving my response, I'll say this is day job, as opposed to the addition. And therefore, to me, yes, your day job is fine and you can be excellent at it, and that's obviously an important part. But I then look also at the wider contribution, because it's about the society and the community. And therefore, that's how I look at the academic ones, but also when we're looking at the community, as you say, there is as I said, if somebody has done something for a very long time, at their own cost, at their own time, and that it's had a great impact on the community, well, many times the only way you're going to get those is to make those community organizations aware that you're there and what they have to do in order to get these people recognized. So it's how we must have got to learn to communicate to the wide community. And there's thousands of community organizations around this country. And thus that would help there is still, I was only interviewed last week by a black newspaper about the honour system. So there is still a view out there, like Tom said, about the empire and why you should take it. And therefore, I think that those people who are from the empire, my view, my mother puts it succinctly, but then she's very Jamaican with no frills. And when I told the journalist that, he laughed because he knows exactly where she's coming from. However, again, it's about, my argument for myself. People, I use my title, especially the knighthood thing is on my Twitter. And initially, there was a whole load of attacks. Where do you get it? You're obviously part of the system. And when I point out, I defended the position by saying that I am I've been a part of this empire since 1655. And therefore, one of the things that racists do is to take away your sense of belonging. And honours is part of your sense of belonging because it's given by the people, it is recommended by the people, essentially, for the people. And that's what I told him. So a lot of people aren't aware of that, this angle. It's recommended essentially by the people, for the people. And thus, so therefore, there is a lack of knowledge as to the process. And I think that's what we've got to try and get across.
I completely agree, Jeff. And I think that point that people will sometimes try to create divisions, and one of the things the honours system should do is be broad and inclusive in the way it recognises on every sort of dimension of inclusion. Thank you. We've got a question in the chat, so we should answer it. It says, I am a DL and we've discussed the application processes we want to encourage more. There is frustration about how long it can take for awards to be considered. Can you say more about timescales? So Steve talked about this a little bit at the beginning. I mean, essentially, there's an extremely rigid timescale set, at least partly by the Queen and her birthday and where it falls in relation to New Year. So there's 2 honours rounds a year, and there's quite a long, because you're dealing with a lot of nominations, and because we do really try and make sure that kind of both there's a kind of really good and rigorous process to kind of filter and organise them for the committees, and then the committees have a sort of staged process to look through them. So there's the individual committees, and then there's a sort of overarching thing that sits above it. It does take a bit of time, and I mean, broadly speaking, I think my honours team would say that as soon as they finish one round, they're off and running on the next one. And particularly if your nomination goes in sort of halfway through, and you're really hoping if you put it in I don't know, October, and you're hoping to get it in for New Year, you're likely to be a little bit late and have to wait all the way through until it goes into the following birthday round. And I kind of get how frustrating that is. And it is also, I mean, that is definitely one of the bits of the process that feels a bit, it sort of disappears into the maw of this massive process, and then kind of much later something does or does not pop out of it. I think, I mean, we have had a few attempts at trying to speed the thing up, but it's quite difficult to get away from those 2 polls, and also from the fact that if you're going to be kind of fair, open and transparent while managing a huge volume, it is going to take a little bit of time. But I wonder whether we should just be really much clearer with people about what they can expect. So when you would need to have got something in by for it to be considered for each round. I don't think we should restrict people from putting in an application at any time. I think that's really important. I think the really, really simple message that anyone can nominate anyone for an honour at any time is really important in helping make sure that we kind of don't create artificial barriers. But I wonder whether when things have gone in, we do a little bit more coming back to people and saying, okay, this is it's gone in, you probably won't hear anything until this, and this is why, so that we're not leaving people sort of wondering. Steve, I don't know if you
I agree with that. Certainly since I've been on the committee, I often get asked how long. So what happens is people put something in, and then it goes a couple of cycles and they haven't heard anything, and the name hasn't appeared that they thought might appear. And that often is a frustration, I think, in terms of where is the citation in the process. And I think we could do something to be clear, well, in that feedback loop about how long, if it hasn't happened within a certain time, it may not, it may have been considered and it may not be then going forward.
Yeah, because this is one of those processes where we say yes but not no usually. But yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. You've seen this a bit from the Scottish involvement. I don't know if you had any reflections on how long it takes.
Well, I get the forms towards almost the end of the process. So I'm not always aware of how long. And sometimes forms, once they come to me, I sometimes will say, could you check that again? Yeah. Because that they may not have the same experience and expertise that I have in terms of looking at an applicant, and thus, as an independent advisor, that's what I do. So I have no thing on the time, but as you've said, and Steve has said, we should have when the form is submitted, we should write back and say, this will be for the birthday honours, or this will be for the New Year's, because that's you can't, it is then going forward, and then you then say, we will keep you informed in terms of the situation. And I think that will keep people interested.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I think giving people a bit more sense of time frame would be good. I think that at the moment the system doesn't give information on names that don't appear in lists, and that's partly because the kind of long-standing position is that you don't say, particularly if someone's declined or not been offered, you don't, so the kind of the tricky bit of it is it's really difficult. There isn't a point at which you ever say this person's definitely been unsuccessful, go away. And so sometimes people are waiting because a decision has actually been taken. And I think that's, again, that's above even my pay grade, I would suggest. But I understand why it's done like that, because you want the honour system to be about the positives and the success stories, rather than starting to be something that, it's not an exam. But I think it does give it then that interesting kind of challenge that if somebody's either not come through, and again, occasionally there are kind of, you have a list in which there's so there are various ways in which they try and kind of keep the balance between the different honours committees. There are limits of honours at each level, and so sometimes you might have a kind of really congested list and then hold someone over for a future round. And again, I think sometimes people will see the process taking a really long time, but actually that is the committee trying to get the right result for someone.
Yeah,
wouldn't necessarily get the right result if they were kept in that rather congested place. But again, the convention is we don't go out and tell people that, because the closer you get to giving people a blow by blow through the process, the harder it is to sustain the position that you don't talk about people who haven't come through. So I think that's tricky, actually. But I do wonder whether we can give people. I mean, maybe it's about more generic information about how the process works and what it might mean if you haven't heard for a bit.
Yeah, okay. What one could say is if you haven't heard, the submission is still in the process. What one could say that. We either say it's because some people will be waiting whether, if they know the Queen's, birthday is coming and gone, they're not idiots. They know that if it's gone, it can't be for that. And if for the New Year's, then they'll start waiting for a letter, thinking it's for the New Year. So I think once the form is received, then one could say we will keep you informed, and you say, well, it is still in the process. That should be a response, because people want to know, is it still in the process?
The problem with that is I completely take the point, Jeff. I think the challenge is some people might still be in the process, other people in reality are not. And I think there's something about, and if you're not going to say no, then if you give all information except no, you've suddenly told people no by default. And I think I think it's a really tricky one. Steve.
I was going to say, I think it is. Yeah, I agree. It's really tricky, and I guess the closest we could get is broad brush. Normally, this is the process, and we use normally as a way of just defining, 2-3 years, whatever is a sensible space for things to be considered, because in reality, that's often what's happening. I absolutely agree. I don't think we can go back with detail, and I don't think we can go back being sort of keeping people informed. It becomes too difficult for us to track that and do that. I think the bureaucracy would be a nightmare as well.
Yeah, but I think more generic information might be really helpful. So that kind of, once you've put it in, almost a sort of flow diagram of what happens and what you might not hear for a long time, because this is what we're doing. You might even not hear through a round, but once you've put it in, it's in the process and it will be properly considered. And that, I think, is I think there's something about helping people understand why it might feel like things take ages.
So the team have put in an honours update.
They've got an email address and a number you can call if you want progress updates on a nomination you've submitted. Thank you, team.
But I think that what you're doing this week is very important, because I just think there is no transparency. And that's not to say there's anything hidden, but it's to say that the general public do not understand what happens. And so I've had people say, oh, that's in the gift of the Prime Minister. Well, it's clearly not. There's a very rigorous process of committees and independence. It's not a political appointee. And I think the transparency, and you can see that, as I say, when you look at the list of people who've been honoured, but to understand it might take a year. There is a committee and then a more senior committee. There are letters of support. There is no guarantee of success. They might sound anodyne, but some guidance, I'm sure there is some, but some guidance as to when and how and what's happening, and publicising that a bit more would help nominees, but also perhaps the nominated realise that actually, who knows when it comes, if it comes at all, but we hope it comes.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think we just need to keep pressing all the time, because you're right. I mean, a lot of this information is there. It's just it's a bit in that space of, you slightly have to know to look for it, and and I think kind of keeping testing ourselves and pushing ourselves on how can we get more good information out and make it easier. And also kind of at the moment where somebody wants to know. So again, people may well find the bit where you fill the nomination form and fill it in without reading all the stuff about what happens. And so can we just make sure that once you've sent your nomination, you get the kind of, there's loads of work we do on user journeys in services in government more broadly that tells you that there are kind of moments when people, as it were, have asked a question and want an answer that you can give them, which they'll then take in the moment. But I do think they're kind of, I mean, even the those really simple messages, like anyone can nominate anyone for an honour, you can do it any time, and it will be properly considered and go through a proper process. And by the way, your chances of getting somebody an honour are significantly higher if you nominate them than if you don't. Even those, I think, I was at a social care roundtable for the launch of our care review, and there were two incredibly impressive young men there who talked about their experience of growing up in foster care and how extraordinary their foster parents had been. And they said they're the sort of people who, you know, the system should celebrate. And so I talked to them afterwards and said, you know, basically, if you wrote down what you said to me today on an honours form, they'd have a really decent chance through the system. And they said, but we can't nominate someone for an honour. And I said, yeah, absolutely can. And there's, you know, still just, you know, people don't know.
But then when you have, you know, you had Len Sisse, I believe, talking earlier. Yeah. Len Sisse is somebody who came through the care system. Yeah. And, you know, exactly that background. And now he's whatever age he is. But it's when you show people like that, then folk like you're talking about realise it could be for them, could be for anyone.
Yeah, and it goes back to Steve's point about through the year celebrating some of the people who don't end up on the front page of the paper on the day. And actually, to be fair, we've done better. We and the media have got better at pulling out some of those stories. You just don't. It's getting sort of scale with those. I think that's really, really important and powerful.
The local newspapers will do that. I think that a local newspaper know the local people.
Yeah.
And thus one could encourage them. So it's not just national newspapers.
No, absolutely. Local media is really important and really trusted. Local radio is one of the most trusted news sources. So there's lots. Because the local papers are brilliant, but their circulation is, you know, a bit like that. So I think there's lots there. Colleagues, we're just coming slightly towards the end. I think we had a slot for Q&A, which I've slightly subverted by pulling the questions that I can see into the conversation we've already had. And unless there's somebody out there who can give even more questions than we've answered, I'm not sure that there's a lot more Q&A to do. But I did wonder if we should just spend the last few minutes. I was going to ask each panellist in turn to just, in the spirit of what we've been discussing, to give their key parting message, particularly to anyone out there who might be either considering nominating someone for an honour or not currently considering nominating someone for an honour, but you would like to make your best impassioned plea for them to reconsider and perhaps think about doing so. Tom, would you like to speak first on this one?
Yeah, and I think this group have inspired me to go away and nominate somebody, because I'm only here because somebody nominated me, and presumably because Steve's committee or whoever thought long and hard about me. There's a whole process, and therefore it behoves me to go away and think, I know who's busy in front of camera or behind stage in academia in my area, and so I should jolly well make sure you know too. And that's the only way that they can get anywhere. And you might not consider them worthy, but you know, maybe I need to put in 2 or 3. But you know, I hope that people who watch this will do likewise, because nothing will change unless that action is taken. I do think that there is some wonderfully deserving people there. But if your name of your favourite person is not there, that's probably because you haven't nominated them. So get on with it.
Thanks very much indeed, Tom. Jeff, over to you.
I would just simply say this is there's a misconception that the honours system is this elitist group of people who decide that somebody should get an honour. That needs to be clarified, and we could summarize it as I said before. It is by the people, for the people.
Absolutely. By the people, for the people. I think that's a brilliant summary. Margaret, how about you?
I think I would recommend that people go ahead and do it, building on what earlier panelists have said, I think it's really important that the work that people do is valued. And this is a lovely way of recognising and valuing that work. And people that work in that area that maybe don't get that much visibility can take heart from that themselves to see that this work is being recognised. So I would say go ahead and nominate people.
Thanks, Margaret. Steve, you and I know that we struggle to consider people if no one's nominated them.
Absolutely. If the pieces of paper that aren't there, then we can't really do a great job finding and celebrating the great things that people are doing. I think it is for the people. It is by the people. It is something that brings people together. And it's, I think what people forget is that there's a huge pride in nominating. And then, of course, for the recipients, there's pride and people feel proud and part of a community. And the honours system is about bringing people together. It is about inclusivity. And it is about saying thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing. It is important, it matters, and it's being done incredibly well. So that thank you, often when people receive their awards, they receive them on the basis of course, recognizing what they've done, but actually recognizing a much wider group of people and individuals that they have been supported by or have brought to the attention of others and can see the impact of that work. So this is, I think, if people have spotted great work, spotted talent, then please let's say thank you and let's celebrate that and bring the nation together through something that is a celebratory event.
Thank you. Let's sing our unsung heroes. And we can sing some of the sung ones more too. I think one of the things that's really notable about the honours system is that even people who you think must know by now that people think they're brilliant and are doing amazing work still, I think, quite often have actually an emotional reaction to being awarded an honour and feel it hard. So thank you. I'm going to ask Shirley to come back in, who's going to, she was going to help us with Q&A, but I think, as I say, I think I accidentally did the cues. But Shirley, you were going to close for us and actually show a couple of slides that might respond to some of the things that we've been talking about in the session. Over to you.
Thank you, Susan, and members of the panel for a really interesting and thought-provoking conversation. So, just briefly, this slide shows the process. We had a few conversations about the process and understanding more about how it works. And basically, when a nomination comes in through to the department, all the stakeholder and public nominations, they will go to the relevant department to consider. And following that consideration and rigorous due diligence process and final sign off from the PermSec, the nomination will then be fed through to the various committees, and from the individual committees, it will then be fed through to the main committee, the main recommendations, and those recommendations will go for final approval by the Prime Minister and then approval by the Queen. Next slide, please, Will. So basically, are you ready to nominate someone? Make sure your nomination includes a significant contribution, not just a day job, but how they've gone above and beyond expectations and the impact that person has had on society. A key theme that I think was brought out was telling the story by the people for the people, and there's a wealth of knowledge out there on the Cabinet Office website, and you can see the email there, but also the honours team in the education department. We are there to support you and guide you through the process, answer your questions if you have any issues with that. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much indeed, Shirley.
Thank you.
think that might be us done. So I was just going to thank again all our panelists, everyone who's joined. Draw your attention to all the information in the chat bar from the Honours and Appointments Secretariat about how to nominate and track your nomination through the system. And once again, to say thank you to Cabinet Office colleagues, to Shirley and my own Honours team, who have all been part of not just running the lots of bits of this process, but this really brilliant week. And I think Honours Week is a brilliant thing, and we should do more of it, because the real theme that's run through today is we need to just keep making sure people know this is possible, understand enough of the system to know it's worth nominating and that it's a fair and good process, and then we can make sure the honour system is doing what it was intended to do, which is celebrating excellence across the whole nation and everybody who shows it, whatever their background, whatever their role, in all the kinds of wonderful and fantastic ways that we know people do every day around the country, to sing both the heroes people know about and the unsung heroes too. Thank you very much indeed.